What is up, YouTube, and welcome back to another episode of Elevate Life and Elevate Fitness. In today's episode, we are going to be covering macronutrients, or macros for short. What are they? What do they mean? How do you figure them out? And how do you figure out what your ideal macro ratio is? I know last time we said we were going to cover meal prep as well, but macros is such a big subject, and I want you guys to have your macronutrient ratios figured out before we cover meal prep. Before we get started, if this is content that's valuable to you and you enjoy watching these videos, please consider subscribing, liking, comment, and sharing. It helps us on our channel and helps get this information to as many people as need it and the people that can benefit from it most. So please consider subscribing, comment, like, and share. Hang tight, y'all. We have another episode full of useful information, tips, and tricks on how to figure macros out. Stick with us. Here we go. Macronutrients, or macros for short. What are they? How are they important? What do they mean? And how are they important in living a sustainable, healthy lifestyle? The easiest definition I can give you of macros is this. Macro means large or big, and macros are those nutrients that our body requires in the largest amounts. So what are these macronutrients? Well, there are three: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. These are the nutrients our body requires to keep our systems running and our structures healthy and functional. Protein. Protein's a chain of amino acids, and there are 20 of them that your body needs. 9 of these are classified as essential. What does essential mean? Well, some amino acids can be made naturally in our body, and 9 of those we have to ingest or eat via food. Our body can't make those, so we have to eat them. So why is protein important? It's vital for certain body functions, including but not limited to tissue structure, metabolism, transport, acid-base balance, and hormone regulation. How much protein in your diet you need in your diet depends on how active you are, how much you exercise, how old you are, your weight, your amount of lean muscle mass. So we know protein's important for our diet, but not all protein is created equal. There are complete and incomplete proteins. Complete proteins contain all 9 essential amino acids, and incomplete proteins do not. Complete proteins include things like soy, eggs, dairy, fish, beef, pork, and poultry. I don't want to alienate any of the vegans or vegetarians out there, so you guys are going to need to consume a variety of incomplete proteins to meet your needs. Things like beans, nuts, seeds, lentils, and whole grains should get you where you need to go. Carbohydrates. Carbs are the body's primary source of gas, petrol, fuel, energy, whatever you choose to call it. You need to stick to healthy sources of carbohydrates, including unprocessed whole grains, vegetables, beans, and fruits. Avoid the easily digestible carbohydrates such as refined processed white flour, sugar, soda, or anything that's overly processed. Fats. Fats are an essential part of our diet and play a vital role in the structure and function of cells. They insulate our body and our organs. They provide essential fatty acids that our bodies can't make, and they absorb fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, and they are also a secondary source of energy. Just like proteins and carbohydrates, not all fats are created equal. There are good fats and there are bad fats. You need to stick to the healthy monounsaturated fats, things like olive oil, avocados, nuts, and nut butters, and limit the amount of saturated fat you're consuming, things that can be found in beef, butter, high-fat dairy, and coconut oil. How much fuel is in these macros? Well, that's a great question, and it's so important to the foundation for building our macro profiles. Protein contains 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrates also contain 4 calories per gram, and fat comes in at the highest, containing 9 calories per gram. If you haven't watched the video on diets, I will link it below. You're going to need to go back and watch that after you watch this video. It's got important information about calories, caloric intake, and caloric deficits, and how to find your maintenance calories if your goal is to lose fat or even just maintain your current weight. If your goal is to lose fat and retain mass, you need to be in a 10 to 20% caloric deficit of your maintenance calories, and you need to consume about 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and about 0.3 grams or 15 to 25% of your calories of fat per pound of body weight, with the remainder of your calories coming from carbohydrates. If your goal is to put on weight or you're in a bulking phase, you will need to be in a caloric surplus of about 10% of your maintenance calories and consume about 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, and 20 to 30% of your calories should come from fat, with the remainder of those calories coming from, you guessed it, carbohydrates. You might be thinking, that's awesome, Jeff. You put a bunch of numbers on the screen, but I still have no idea how to figure any of this out. Well, I'm going to keep it as simple as I can, and I'm going to walk you through a few different scenarios to paint a better picture on how to use this information to find your macro gold. First, let's look at Joe Anybody, our 200-pound, 6-foot tall, 30-year-old, slightly overweight, poorly conditioned male, to see what his macros would look like to lose weight. We know his maintenance calories are 2,300, works a desk job, lives a sedentary lifestyle, but Joe wants to make a change and is going to start exercising 1 to 3 times per week. This would increase his maintenance needs to around 2,600 calories per day. To make this a lifestyle change versus a fad, quick weight loss, crash diet, Joe needs to aim to lose 0.5 to 1% of his body weight per week. That means Joe should be losing 1 to 2 pounds per week. This means he needs to reduce his daily caloric intake by 10 to 20% of that 2,600 calorie maintenance goal. So Joe needs to eat between 2,080 and 2,340 calories per day. So Joe's new calorie goal is 2,080 calories per day, and he can now get started figuring out his macro plan. For simplicity's sake, Joe is going to consume 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, which is where I recommend everyone start, regardless if you're in a cut or a bulking phase. This gives Joe 200 grams or 800 calories of protein per day. Joe doesn't care whether he eats a high or a low-fat diet, so he decides just to start in the middle of that 15 to 25%. So Joe's going to consume 20% of his calories from fat, which is 416 calories or roughly 46 grams of fat per day. That leaves Joe 864 calories or 185 grams of carbohydrate per day. So Joe Anybody, who's slightly overweight, now has his starting macro ratios. Protein is 200 grams or 38% of his total calories. Fat is 46 grams or 20% of his total calories. And carbohydrates are 216 grams or 42% of his total carbohydrates. So as you can see, those percentages all add up to 100%, and Joe is covered and ready to go. Next, let's look at Stanley Stick. Stan is a 25-year-old male that is 72 inches tall and weighs in at 160 pounds. Stanley has always been thin, and despite his best efforts, has never been able to put on weight. Stan works a full-time job doing construction and is on the go and on his feet, moving constantly at least 10 hours a day. Stan's maintenance calories are approximately 3,300 calories per day. He's never really gone to the gym or lifted weights outside of his job, but he's recently decided he wants to enter a physique competition 1 year from today. Stan has the opposite problem from Joe. Stan needs to gain weight, and in order to do that, he has to be in a calorie surplus. The opposite is also true for the percentage of body weight Stan should be focusing on gaining per week. He should be focused on gaining 0.5 to 1 pound of body weight per week. In order to do this, Stan's going to need to increase his daily caloric intake 10 to 20%. Stanley wants to get that ball rolling as fast as possible, so he decides he's going to increase his daily calorie intake by 15%, which means his new calorie goal is 3,795 calories per day. Remember, roughly 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is recommended for a cut or a bulk. So Stan sets his protein at 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. 1.2 times 160 is 192 grams of protein per day, or 768 calories per day. Stan wants to eat a slightly higher fat diet and sets his goal for fat at 30% of his daily calorie needs, or 1,138 calories from fat, which is roughly 126 grams of fat per day. The remainder of Stan's calories will come from carbs. He knows he is eating 768 calories from protein and 1,138 calories from fat, so he knows he needs to eat 1,889 calories from carbohydrates, or roughly 472 grams of carbohydrate per day. So now Stanley Stick has his macro goal set. Protein is 192 grams, or 20% of his daily calories. Fat is 126 grams, or 30% of his daily calories. And carbs are 472 grams, or 50% of his daily calories. Lastly, we've got Sally Short. Sally is a 35-year-old female that is 64 inches tall and weighs 250 pounds. Sally's always struggled with her weight and has tried many fad diets, but has never been able to keep the weight off long term. She is a lawyer and spends most of her day at a desk and gets little to no exercise. Sally has decided that enough is enough and she needs to make a lifestyle change. Sally's maintenance calories are approximately 2,400 calories per day, but has never tracked her macros and only done strict calorie deficit diets in the past. She will start with a 20% reduction in calories, which gives her a new calorie goal of 1,920 calories per day. Sally is extremely overweight, so we're going to use her height in centimeters to find her protein goal because she is likely lower on lean muscle mass. The goal here is 1 gram of protein per centimeter of height, or in Sally's case, 163 centimeters tall is 163 grams of protein per day. 163 grams of protein is 652 calories. Sally prefers to eat a lower fat diet and is going to consume the minimum recommended fat in her diet and sets her goal at 20% of her calories from fat. This gives Sally 384 calories or 43 grams of fat per day. So now that Sally knows her protein and fat goal, she can fill in the remainder of her calories with carbohydrates. Her maintenance calories of 1,920 minus the protein at 652 and minus the fat at 384 leaves her 884 calories from carbohydrates. 884 calories divided by 4 grams per calorie of carbohydrate leaves her with 221 grams of carbs per day. So Sally Short also has her starting macro goals. Protein, 163 grams or 34% of her daily calories. Fat, 43 grams or 20% of her daily calories. And carbohydrates, 221 grams or 46% of her daily calories. Joe, Stan, and Sally all have their starting macros, but that's just it, starting. This is just a starting point. They'll need to revisit this every month as their weight changes and make adjustments to macros based on their current weight, progress, or lack of progress. This is a great place to start, but by no means is it a one-size-fits-all plan. Everyone reacts to food slightly differently, and your macros need to be individualized. It'll take some trial and error to get these dialed in to meet your body's needs. This is a fantastic place to start. I know you've heard me all say it before, but if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Be consistent with your diet, but don't be so strict that you give yourself no room for error. Everyone, and I mean everyone, is going to make a mistake. They're going to have a bad meal. They're going to have a bad day. It's okay. It's normal. It's okay to have a cheat meal or treat yourself occasionally. And in fact, it's almost vital to your long-term success. Just build that cheat meal or treat into your macros and go from there. Remember, this is a lifestyle change, not a fad diet plan or short-term cut for your trip to the Bahamas in 6 weeks. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Do not expect miracles overnight. Be patient, be consistent, and be dedicated to the process. As always, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, comment, like, and share with anyone that you think could benefit from this information. And until next time, Elevate family, elevate your life. Peace.